Hello, welcome to or back to Oh My Bookishness. Today we are going to be talking about Medieval Y2K, which if you don't know what that is, well, you will by the end of the video. But basically it is referencing the sort of vibe that you get from media that was made in the early 2000s, the 90s, early 2000s, around Y2K, that is medieval inspired. And it just kind of has a certain something to it, you know, that makes it a little different than other medieval and medieval fantasy media. So I'm gonna give you some of my recommendations for books and movies and maybe even some TV shows that will give you all of the medieval Y2K vibes. But as always, before we get into that, I always like to talk about what book I am currently reading, and currently I am reading Fire Study by Maria V. Snyder. And I'm about halfway through this one right now and enjoying it very, very much. But yeah, some of the other big pieces of media that are referenced a lot when talking about medieval Y2K are Elle Enchanted, Shrek, of course, and all of its sequels. And then A Knight's Tale is the other one that I've heard mentioned a lot. Hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of what the aesthetic is that we're looking for, and some of the things that we're hoping to curate in this collection today. Let's get into my list of medieval Y2K books. Most of these are published from the 90s to 2010. There's a couple of more newer ones in there, but for the most part I chose things that were from 1990 to 2010. So here we go. First, I have to mention Dealing with Dragons by Patricia C. Reed. This is a story of a princess who doesn't really want to be a princess. She doesn't want to get married. She doesn't want to do the whole princess thing. So she decides to run away to be captured by a dragon. The dragon isn't as on board with this idea, but decides to take the princess on as a helper. And so the princess kind of becomes almost a servant, but also sort of an advisor to the dragon that she runs away to be with. And many princes and knights try to rescue her over the course of her time with the dragons. And then this is a whole 4-book series, I believe. The humor is kind of what reminds me of Shrek and Elle Enchanted. It doesn't take itself too seriously. It's a no-nonsense kind of book, meaning everybody is very no-nonsense about things. But the solutions that they come up with are sometimes nonsensical, like to get rid of evil wizards. Well, a bucket of water won't work like it does with witches, so what if we add lemon to the water? And that's obviously the way to get rid of wizards. This is one of the newer ones on the list. I actually just purchased this from the Renaissance Fair from the author herself, who was very nice, and she even signed it and everything. I just posted my review for this book on my blog, so be sure to check that out. This is called The Chronicles of Royal High. This is the first book, The Lost Noble. And the reason that this one is on this list is because it features a lot of modern tech with a medieval twist. So very much like how in Elle Enchanted, the movie anyways, there's a mall that they go to with a wooden escalator that somebody is cranking by hand, or how in Shrek they use the magic mirror like a TV. This is very similar to that. They also have magic mirror TVs. They have crystal balls that they use as phones. Different things like that. You know, the fancy carriages are very much like stretch limousines, and there's just a lot of modern technology, but it's not quite modern. It's still medieval, and we still have swords, and we're still, fighting dragons. This one has got a lot of elements that I think medieval Y2K movies possess. And then I want to talk about 3 different series now. They're all children's series, but they're all so good. They're all very nostalgic for me. But all of these they fall under the fairy tale retelling category, but they touch base with a lot of different fairy tales, kind of like how Shrek does, where all of the fairy tales are in the same world. These are very similar, where all the fairy tales take place in the same world. First, we have The Wide Awake Princess by E.D. Baker. This is about Sleeping Beauty's sister Annie, who is cursed at her birth with not being able to be affected with magic, which I think if I'm remembering correctly, it was actually her parents who wanted this curse for her. Since her sister was cursed to sleep for 100 years, they're like, oh, we have a second child. Let's make sure that doesn't happen to her. So she is cursed with uncursability. And when her sister does fall asleep, she has to go on a quest across these fairy tale kingdoms to find a prince to wake up her sister, because she doesn't want to wait for her sister to be asleep for 100 years, as well as like the rest of her family. So she is the wide awake princess. And then in the same category, we have Hero's Guide to Saving Your Kingdom. This one is just perfectly Shrek vibes. It's illustrated. It's about all of the Prince Charmings. It's Rapunzel's prince, Cinderella's prince, Snow White's prince, and Sleeping Beauty's prince. I don't even really remember what happens in this book or its sequel, and I never read the third one, but it is so funny. I do remember that. Just the illustrations are charming. Like, here's Rapunzel. She's so adorable. And then this right here is Rapunzel's prince. It's just, it's so fun. Very comedic. It's got all the fairy tale people living in one world with the humor, very much like Shrek. So if you like Shrek, this is a good one for you. And then the third one I'll mention that is also fairy tale related is Half Upon a Time, which was one of my favorite books in middle school and high school. It's so funny. It's about the son of Jack and the Beanstalk, and he comes across a girl from our world who the evil queen, aka Snow White's evil queen, is trying to get this girl for some reason, and so he's trying to help her out as she navigates this magical world where all of the fairy tales are happening. Okay, this one is another new one, and I think this is the only actual like adult book on this list. The rest are all like YA and children's. But that is Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mayer. I apologize if I said that wrong. This book started out as a TikTok web series, like video series. She was kind of making fun of, the author was kind of making fun of like the dark brooding villain characters in a lot of fantasy series. And she was talking about like, what would I do if I were his assistant in this like evil that he's always doing? And so, she's like bringing him his coffee and things like that. And then she wrote it into a book, and I'm so glad she did, because this is just a delightful book. I have not read the sequel yet. I really need to. But the first one is so fun. Very similar to all the other books I've been talking about. There's a lot of magical humor in this book. As well as some modern tech with medieval twists. It's also in like an office setting, like a work office setting, which is really funny and fits well with like villainy, because what's more evil than a corporate office? There's nothing. Like I said, this one is an adult one, so it might be a little bit more violent. I don't think there's too much like romance, like steaminess in this series, but again, I've only read the first one, so it might get there. We'll see. This is our first and only graphic novel on the list, Cursed Princess Club, which started out as a webtoon series and is now being published as graphic novels. This is about Princess Gwendolyn, who's this princess right here, and her two sisters right here. And they all get betrothed to some princes from a neighboring kingdom, and they're kind of like dealing with meeting boys for the first time. And Gwendolyn is a little different looking than her sisters. People seem to think that she's like a witch who lives in a bog or something, but she had never realized that her whole life, because her family doesn't see anything different about her. They're like, that's just our beautiful Gwen. We love her, she's our sister. Of course she's gorgeous. We're all princesses. You can't be a princess and not be gorgeous. Those are the rules. But for the first time, she meets people who make her feel ugly. And she's kind of dealing with her like self-consciousness about that and wondering, am I cursed? Like what's going on? And she meets a bunch of other princesses, and they are all actually cursed. And so they kind of teach her how they deal with like their curses and, those feelings of self-doubt and things like that. It's just a really heartwarming, fun read, and so ridiculous. Oh my goodness. It's another one of those ones that takes fairy tale tropes and then it just makes them really, really goofy. Like for one of the members of their family accidentally eats poisons and then falls into a cursed sleep. And so they hold a wake for that person. They're like, oh my gosh, this person is dead. But no, it's just called a wake because everybody in the kingdom comes to kiss this person to try to wake them up. So it takes a lot of those fairy tale tropes and then it just kind of turns them into nonsense. And I love that about this series. The only one in the list of books that is not a fantasy but is medieval, I have Catherine Called Birdie. This was assigned reading for me when I was in like middle school, I think. And I didn't really like it when I read it as a kid, but I recently reread it as an adult because the movie just came out on Prime, I want to say. And so I wanted to reread the book. And it's like in a diary format. So Catherine is writing her diary about her father trying to get her married off. He's bringing in all these different suitors and it's about how she's scaring them all away with her pranks and her other nonsense that she gets up to. But it's really fun take on historical medieval times and what this young woman, who's really just a teenager, what she can do to kind of stand up for herself. And then I have to talk about one particular author, and that is Gail Carson Levine, who wrote Ella Enchanted. However, it's been so long since I've read the actual book, but I still don't think it has the same vibes as the movie. I think a lot of people who read the book first and then saw the movie were very upset by the movie because it's what it is. It's very campy. However, I do remember it having some good humor in it still anyways. But rather than recommend this one as a good medieval Y2K, I actually recommend the Princess Tales by Gail Carson Levine. These are all very short, like little books. They're super cute. They take a bunch of different fairy tales and then just kind of make them ridiculous. And then I also, by Gail Carson Levine, recommend A Tale of Two Castles, which is not a super well-known one by her, and the sequel is kind of, you know, if I had read the sequel when I was a kid, I might have liked it better. But the first one is really, really fun. It has a dragon who is a detective, and that's really all that you need to know. But it is also the only book that I've ever come across that is a Puss in Boots retelling. So it's got that connection to Shrek a little bit too. So it's good, it's funny, and there's a dragon detective. What more do I need to say? Okay, and then we are gonna speed run movies and TV shows. First, the TV shows. I just want to mention Merlin, of course, which is a little bit heartbreaking, but you know, it's so funny. It's a medieval fantasy comedy about Merlin as a young man coming into Camelot where magic is forbidden, and he's a very magical guy, so this causes a lot of problem. And then I will also mention Jane and the Dragon, which is not a super well-known show. It's a cartoon. It's based off of two picture books, which are very much not like the show, but in the show it's about this young lady in waiting. Let's call her Jane. This girl wasn't ordinary. She didn't want to be, she wants to be a knight. She wants to prove that a girl can be a knight, but her friends all laughed at her. But she wouldn't be discouraged. She trained in secret. Then a dragon pinched the royal prince and everyone was freaking. So she went along to the dragon's home to slay the dragon. But hey now, Jane and the dragon are best friends now. So Jane gets to train to become a knight, and the dragon is always hanging around telling jokes and trying to distract her from her knight's training. I'm sorry if that didn't make any sense. I was literally just saying the lyrics from the theme song. But it also has that kind of nostalgic feel to it that you get with Y2K animation, or like early 2000s animation, 3D animation, where it's like, something about this is a little uncanny valley. You couldn't decide if you wanted to be artistic or realistic, and it just landed somewhere kind of creepy in the middle in like a nostalgic way. Kind of like the Barbie movies. Last TV show I'll mention is the 2006 BBC Robin Hood, which nobody knows about. I don't know why nobody knows about this show. It has, what's his name? Richard Armitage is one of the main bad guys. He's awful in this show. He's just the worst. But he's in there and he looks very handsome. And Robin Hood is also very handsome, but like standing next to Richard Armitage, I don't know. Not a fantasy, but it's very much 2006. And tries very hard to be medieval, but some of the costumes are just a little bit low budget. I actually really dislike in the 3rd season, you can tell that they get a huge budget increase because all of their costumes look so much better. But I kind of hate that because I love season 1 and 2 when the costumes are terrible. It really gives those Medieval Y2K vibes. For movies, one that I'm gonna mention is Happily Never After, which is an animated movie that, again, people just don't really talk about it very much. I don't remember what year it was released, but it's a Cinderella retelling. There's a sequel that's a Snow White retelling, and I don't like that one very much. But the first one is a Cinderella retelling, and I just learned in preparation for this video that the main character is played by Sarah Michelle Gellar, and the other main character is played by Freddie Prinze Jr., which, if you don't know, they play Daphne and Fred in the 2002 Scooby-Doo movie, and Sarah Michelle Gellar also plays Buffy in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So now I need to rewatch that movie, but anyway, it's another one where it's a modern take on fairy tales, but it's still kind of medieval technology, like they use magic as their technology. It has a great soundtrack. It's terrifyingly animated. But yeah, very good for an early 2000s fantasy kids movie, fairy tale retelling. And then a newer one, but not actually all that much newer because I'm old, is Mirror Mirror, which is a Snow White retelling. It's like my favorite live action Snow White movie. It's very good, and it's got a fun soundtrack, and it's very well cast. I couldn't tell you the names of anybody who's in it because it's been a while since I've seen it, but it's good. It's really good. And I'll also mention that I think Barbie movies are really good Medieval Y2K movies, particularly Rapunzel. But it's a different sort of Medieval Y2K. It's a much gentler, more pastel Medieval Y2K. I also feel like Diamond Castle, Swan Lake, Princess and the Pauper, they all kind of fit into that Medieval Y2K genre as well. And 2 newer ones that I also just want to mention. They're not like my favorite movies, but I think that they also fit this Medieval Y2K sort of feeling. If you're just looking for more Medieval Y2K content, is Charming, which it's like, I think Prince Charming gets cursed. I don't really remember. I think it's on Netflix. It's an animated movie. And then another one is Red Shoes and the Seven Dwarfs, which when I first saw the trailer for it, I'm like, what in the fat phobia is this? Because it is about a plus-sized Snow White who puts on these red shoes and it makes her very thin. And the trailer makes it seem like thin equals beautiful, which is not true. And so watching the trailer, you're like, what piece of garbage movie is this? But then the actual movie has a really good message about like how there's so many different kinds of beauty, and like loving yourself, and it's really good. It's very cute. Yeah, I recommend that one more than I recommend Charming because I don't really remember anything about Charming. When I was looking up movies for this video, I was like, yeah, Charming fits that vibe. But I couldn't tell you anything about it, so don't take my word for it for that one. All right, well, those are all of the Medieval Y2K media pieces that I have to recommend for you. I've kind of seen people calling this summer Medieval Y2K summer. There's been, and I don't know if this is just because this is what I'm interested in, but there's been so many like Renaissance Fair videos on my For You page on TikTok. I've just like a ton of Renaissance Fair content that I've seen, which I feel like Renaissance Fair also kind of fits Medieval Y2K because it's modern and medieval combined. I've seen a lot of people get really interested in the Renaissance Fair this year. I've seen people talking more about Ella Enchanted, Shrek, and A Knight's Tale. And Ever After, which I think is more Renaissance. So I know I just said the Renaissance Fair fits this, but let's be honest, the Renaissance Fair feels more medieval and more fantasy. But the actual like French and Italian Renaissance is Ever After, the movie, which I love that movie, but I just don't think it fits this vibe so much. But anyway, now I'm rambling. So I will leave you with those recommendations, and I don't know how to end a video, so bye!